Hi everyone, welcome to another QuickBooks Online video. Today's video is intended for QBO newbies who have no experience whatsoever with the software. The agenda for today is laid out on the screen. I just want to make note that I will not be covering items such as inventory, sales orders, purchase orders, and any type of project costing. Let's move forward with the video. First of all, if you're interested in QBO and would like to experiment with the software before you actually buy it, you can do so through the QBO test drive link. The best way for you to find the link is by typing QuickBooks Online test drive in Google, and it should be one of the first links that you'll see. So for instance, if I click here, I'm brought to the QBO link. And this will be a sample file that has data already in it. In this case, it's called Craig's Design and Landscaping Services Company. You can also explore further by signing up for a free trial for 30 days. So what you can do is you can go on Intuit's website or just Google QuickBooks Online and you'll be brought to the different packages for QuickBooks Online, which I'm not going to get into. There's 3 of them. If you have inventory, if you want to use it for inventory, you're going to absolutely need to get the Plus package. But even then, there's some limitations. So you might have to look into QuickBooks Desktop instead. You just need to know that in terms of like you using QuickBooks Online with multiple users, Easy Start will not be good enough because it's only made for one user. So what you'll do is you'll click free trial. Next, you'll be asked to insert your email, your name, phone number, and then eventually you'll get a email sent into your inbox, and you're going to be good to go and start trying out QuickBooks for free temporarily. So once we get into our file, this is what it looks like. This is actually called the dashboard. So QuickBooks Online, if I had to describe it to someone, it's kind of like the QuickBooks desktop version meets Google Chrome. You know, QuickBooks Desktop and Google Chrome, they get together, they have a baby, and you get QBO. And if we look at the left over here, we have a little menu. And a starting point for me is my reports. If we come under reports, we can see all the different types of reports that we have, right? So what I've put in here in my favorites is the one I use most commonly. And I can add a report to my favorites by simply finding that report and just clicking it so that there's a little star. So for instance, I got my accounts receivable aging summary. I want my AP aging summary in there as well. So much like a Google Chrome web page, if you do Control F and start typing whatever it is you want to find, and you hit your enter key, you'll eventually find those series of letters that you're trying to find. So I have my accounts payable here. I'm going to put a star right next to it. And now I see accounts payable aging summary. Obviously, if I untick, it'll come off my favorites. First things we're going to want to set up when we have a new company file is going to be our chart of accounts. So a quick way to get there is by using a keyboard shortcut, which is Control-Alt-A. And this is our chart of accounts. Now, much like QuickBooks Desktop, you can add GL numbers. Some people like using the numbers. Some people don't like using the numbers. I personally like using them. And the way we can activate or start using the GL numbers is by clicking the gear icon up here in the top right corner, also known as settings. So if we go ahead and click that, and we go to accounts and settings afterward, and then we go to advanced, And then we go to chart of accounts. We click this little pencil here, the edit button, and tick enable account numbers, show account numbers. And we save and we hit done. We can now add the account number. So I kind of like following the same logic like what we automatically have in QuickBooks Desktop, which is using GL numbers that start with 1 for assets, 2 for liabilities, 3 for equity, 4 for income, 5 for cost of goods sold, 6 for expenses. So let's say our advertising GL is 6,000, 50. Save and close. See, now we have the 650. Okay, but for the purpose of keeping things simple, we'll not use the GL numbers. I'll remove them when I go back. So it's the same step, really. It's settings, and then we go into, I'll remove them right now, accounts and settings, advanced. Then we find our chart of accounts here, untick, save, done. And we don't have that column anymore. Now let's say we want to create an account. That's quite simple. We go to the top right here. We click new. We click which account type we want. In this case, let's pretend we want to create a new bank checking account. We'll give the account a name. So I'm going to call it Scotia Bank. If I want to give it a description, I can. So I'll say this is my secondary account. Save and close. So now I see I have my TD Bank and I have my Scotia Bank that I created. Let's create an expense GL. So we'll hit new, the type, expenses. And we'll say, we'll call this, we'll create a GL for parking. This is parking expense. We don't need to give a description, although we can. Save and close. And if I do Control F, like a Google web page, like parking, right here. This is the GL we created. Now, maybe we don't like the name parking expense. We want to just call it parking. Well, we can click that downward arrow, hit edit, and remove the expense. So just to highlight the fact that I'm modifying the name, I'll call it parking blah, blah, blah. Okay. Parking blah, blah, blah. Obviously, if we hit run report or account history, it'll run a report on account history. But given that we just started the file, there's nothing in there, right? So we can have a look at that later once we do a little bit of data entry and we start having some transactions in our QBO file. Our next step is going to be to create customers. Hopefully your business is going to generate money. If it's going to generate money, it's probably as a consequence of you billing customers. And in order to bill customers, you're going to have to set up some kind of customer list so you can actually bill them. So the first step requires you going to sales and then hitting customers over here. Now, I was playing around with this a little bit, so I already created 3 customers. One's called ABC Inc., another one's called XYZ Inc., and another one's called Customer 002. Another way I'm going to show you how to do it manually, but there's a way to actually import your customer list. I won't go through that because I want to keep this video basic and not make it too long. There's also a video over here that shows you how to do that right in your QuickBooks file. But if you just want to create one new customer, it's pretty intuitive. You go to the top right here, you hit new customer, and you need to complete these fields. Actually, you don't need to complete all of the fields, but there is one field that you have to complete if you plan on adding this customer. And that's the field that has a red asterisk that says display name as. So let's call this customer 002 since we did 001. And then, of course, the email, you're going to want to put in your customer's email if you plan on billing him and sending him his invoice by email. That will be important. And also what's pretty important is a billing address, right? Because it's a requirement. They will want to see a billing address. And the shipping address, if you leave this little check mark on, it'll just copy paste any information that's in the billing address box to the shipping address box. Now, you might want to leave it unticked if you're going to be shipping goods to a separate address. So sometimes, you, especially when it comes to selling a product, you need to bill a company address, but the goods are shipped to a different warehouse or maybe even another company. So that's why you might want to keep it unticked. And you have these tabs over here. So notes, you can write any notes, whatever you want. Attachments also, maybe when you set up your customer, there's some files that came along with that. Maybe some kind of contract was signed. Maybe you gave the business credit terms, so a credit application was completed, and you want to archive that information, and you don't want to have that physical copy. So you can actually scan it, hit attachments, and you grab your file from wherever. And now we see our customer number 2. And that's how we create a customer. Oh, by the way, we can correct any mistake that we've made when we were setting up our customers by simply clicking on the customer and then clicking this edit button at the top right. And say, for instance, the address was incorrect. It's not 222 Park Avenue. It's 111. Or say we want to go back and add attachments. We can go back, add the attachments. And then we save. And that's all. We're at the point where we can make our first invoice. And there's a variety of ways we can get to the invoice template. So one way is if we're inside of our customer center over here and say we want to bill customer number 1, we just click create invoice down here. Another way, if I get out of here, is say I'm anywhere in my QuickBooks Online. Say I'm in the dashboard and I want to invoice. I can simply hit keyboard shortcut Control-Alt-I. And I'm in the same place. And I would select the actual customer number 1. And if I had my customer number 1 set up, I'd see the email where I'd be sending him his invoice. I'd see the other information over here. I'd see terms. Now the terms I didn't set up for customer number 1, but I automatically get net 30. So I can change it here, but it would be a lot more practical if I go back in the customer setting. I don't want to save this. So I click yes. Under customer number 1, and say we want to change it to, I don't know, net 60 instead of net 30. Instead of changing that information every single time that I make an invoice to customer 1, well, I might as well go in here and under payment and billing, I give him net 60 terms. I save, and now I'll make my invoice, and I can also invoice from where I was previously. And you see, net 60. So then the next thing is to select the date. If we hit M when we're on select date, you can actually go back in intervals of 1 month. If you click H while you're on invoice date or even due date, it will go up in intervals of 1 month. If you select Y, it'll go back in intervals of 1 month. If you hit T, it brings it to today's date. So today we're April 17, 2020. And the due date, well, it calculates the net 60, and it automatically gives you that information, which is nice. The invoice number, well, given that this is our first invoice, it's assigning invoice number 1001. We can change it, if we want to make it 100001 or whatever else, we can change that as well. Product or service, this is where you would set up your items in your item list. You can also set it up directly from here. So right now your two options are sales or hours. So let's pretend that our company is a IT services company or a computer repair company. And one thing that they do is data recovery. And now we're going to bill for data recovery. Well, I can create an item, and I'm not going to go into inventory to keep this, again, simple. So we're not going to be dealing with inventory today. That will be a more advanced topic or video. So we'll pretend this is a non-inventory item, and we'll call it data recovery. And I mean, if it was a product, obviously you might want to give it a SKU. Category. The most important thing is going to be this account. Okay, so I want to link it to a sales account. So this very general sales account is where I want to link it. And I can also assign a price or a rate. So maybe this is $50 we're charging for the data recovery. So if I put 50 and I save and close, I get my rate of 50. So I can write a little description if I want, a blurb, or I could have actually set this up. Let's pretend we're going to also invoice him for a second type of item. We're going to invoice him for PC repair. So we'll call this PC repair. Now you notice that this section I didn't fill out for the data recovery. Here I will. I will say PC work. And again, I'll link it to the general sales account. Save and close. And that wording PC work automatically comes up. So you may or may not choose to fill out that description when you're setting up your item. So save over here for data recovery. Well, you don't want to have anything automatically pop up because depending on the customer, it'll be different every time. So it could be data recovery for USB. Okay. And I didn't give it a rate, right? So let's say that we give it a rate of 25. So I forgot to insert that step, but you can always go back. You can always modify this rate. So say it's a one-time deal where you have a customer where, well, you might want to charge them a little bit more than your standard 50 for the data recovery. You can change that. Okay. And then it will automatically calculate your total. If you want a little message on the invoice, you can do so. Please provide payment within 60 days. Really, any type of information you want to put. And then you can save, or you can do save and send. And we're not going to email it. We didn't set them up for email, but you could. you could email him by selecting save and send, but I'm just gonna save. Although I completed my first invoice, I wasn't entirely happy with what I did. I wasn't happy with the way I created my items. So what I'm gonna do now is take you to the item list, and I'll show you how I can modify and add new items. Probably, if you're gonna be creating your company file, you might want to consider, after you've set up your chart of accounts, to jump into your item list and get that set up before you actually start invoicing. For the purpose of showing you how an invoice is done, I thought it would have been a lot more logical for me to move from creating a customer to invoicing. So now I've shown you that, and I'm going to go back a step and show you how the item list is set up. So to get to our item list, we hit the gear button, we go to lists, and under list there's products and services. Now we see all the products and services. The hours and the sales are there by default. And they're automatically going to show up once you get your QBO file open. We added, remember, the data recovery and the PC repair. Now notice the difference. Those are the data recovery and the PC repair are non-inventory parts, and the hours and sales were set up as services. It would have made more sense for me to set up the data recovery and the PC repair as services, because that's what they are. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is edit data recovery. So I'll hit edit, and I'll change the type to service, and I'll save and close. I'll also make that change to PC repair, and I forgot to add a rate. So I'll also assign a rate, and I'll assign a rate of 25. Now, if I wanted to add additional items, I can click new, and we can add additional items just like we saw previously when we were doing our invoice. What I want to mention is that, like I said previously, we're not going to be touching inventory. So in reality, there's not a big difference whether I set up an item as service or non-inventory, because we're not going to be keeping inventory or keeping track of the quantity of units of that product we sell. Okay. Typically, if you did have inventory and you wanted to have the inventory module set up properly, you would set up inventory items as inventory. And you can choose to use the non-inventory for items that you can call them inventory, but they're so small and insignificant that you don't want to keep track of them. So like consumable things like nuts and bolts and screws, you can select non-inventory. But whether you select non-inventory or service, it doesn't really change anything in terms of financial statement information or counting inventory, because neither non-inventory or service count inventory. So I just wanted to make that clarification. So let's pretend we were selling some additional service. Like, let's say it's laptop repair. Well, I would probably want to select service, and I'll call this laptop repair. And I could copy paste, and I can set sales price of, let's say, 60, and it's the exact same deal, you know, save and close. So one more mention about this item list is that you can also associate a cost with your item, whether that's a service or a non-inventory part. You'll notice that these items have a column that says sales price, and you see there are amounts, 50, 60, 25, but there's no cost amounts in the column. That's because we didn't associate a cost. So if I edit my data recovery item and I go down here where it says purchasing information, if I tick that, that's important because it'll open up some extra boxes. The box that I want to show you is this cost and expense account. So now when this becomes useful is when we set up the purchasing info. If we purchase the same item, well, we can put, let's say we purchase or we outsource our data recovery and have someone else do it for us. We can put 30 here and we can select the purchase GL and we can save and close. So that's useful when we create purchase orders, which I'm not going to get into now. I'll leave a link below for a purchase order video and for sales order video. But essentially, when we do the purchase order and we want to pick an item called data recovery, that'll pop up. So that's what's very useful about it. Okay, back in our customer center, let's pretend we are now getting paid from our client. And therefore, what we want to do is receive a payment from the customer. So if we go in our customer center, we notice that customer 1 has an open balance. And that means that we're waiting for a payment from him. So let's say that payment comes in. We hit this receive payment button over here. And let's pretend that he didn't pay both of his invoices. He paid one of them. He paid the $85 invoice. So what we're going to want to do is payment date. Let's say he paid it the same day. It's the day, but say he would have paid it on another date. We select the date. We will probably want to select the date that it's going to be going into our account. But here we can select the payment method. So check, let's say, and the reference number will probably be the check number. So let's say it's check number, I don't know, 80, okay? And we'll say that only the $85 check was paid. So then QuickBooks is smart enough to realize that, oh wait, if only $85 are paid, in all likeliness, it's relating to invoice number 1001. And we can go ahead and click Save and New. Or we can just right click here and click Save and Close. Save and New would have brought us to another payment. So now if we go back, we see that there's that $100 balance. Another way, and the most common way of receiving our payments, is by looking at what's coming in from our bank feed. If we were looking at our bank feed, it would look something like this. Okay, so we will go under banking and we would be able to see this kind of information. And what this is essentially is just transactions that have been imported from our bank account into QuickBooks, but that have not yet been recorded in QuickBooks. So for each one of these transactions, on the right side over here is going to be some kind of action that we're going to have to do. So we might have to add this, or we might have to match. Now let's assume that this $224.45 amount was our payment. Was our payment from our customer. It's money received. It's an inflow of money. And there was an invoice open for that same amount, $224.45. QuickBooks would have automatically thought that it relates to an open invoice of $224.45. And instead of seeing the word add over here on the side, it would have said match. And what that means is it would have allowed you automatically from here to match it to that money that is open, to that invoice. And that's essentially how the bank feeds work. When you first open up QuickBooks, Online, it's going to ask you if you want to connect to your bank. If you haven't connected to your bank, as soon as you've opened up the company file, you can do so from the dashboard by clicking Connect Bank, or you can always go back into that banking section and you can basically take it from there. I mean, all you really need to do is select your bank from a drop-down list of different banks, and then you just need to select your account number and whatever password it is that you use to log into your bank. And then all the time, every single time you get in, it'll just retrieve that information from your bank. So the next item on our agenda is to look at creating vendors, and then we're going to be entering bills from vendors, and then we're eventually going to look at how we can pay those vendors. So much like the customers, by creating customers, we went into sales and then customers. For vendors, we go to expenses and then suppliers. And when we get in there, we see this little image. It says, do you want to import suppliers? So again, we're not going to look at that. You can batch import suppliers if you already have a supplier list. We're going to do it manually. It's the exact same concept. Just like with the customers, enter their information. But again, the red asterisk is the most essential piece of information. So we're going to call our first supplier, supplier 1. That field needs to be completed. And the address, if you're set up for checks, if you've purchased checks that allow you to print from QuickBooks to your printer, then you're going to want to make sure you have the correct address information, because if you also purchased window envelopes, well, it's going to be a one-shot deal. Basically, you just need to put in your check inside the window envelope, and in the transparent part, the address will show up and you're good to go. You can send that check out. So again, over here, we have attachments. We can insert notes if we want to put their business ID, etc., etc. Terms, if we're required to pay, like say this guy, it's 60 days. We have 60 days to pay a bill from him. We can select the appropriate terms. Save and close, or just save actually. And we see our supplier 1, right? New supplier, hit new supplier. We'll call this supplier 2. Save. Now supplier 3, that's another supplier, and so on and so forth. By the way, there's a keyboard shortcut to get to our supplier list. So if I get out of here for a second, I go back to the dashboard and I do keyboard shortcut Control-Alt-V. I'm back in my supplier center, and I entered my suppliers a little bit fast and I made a mistake here. So instead of calling what I wanted to call supplier 3, I ended up calling him just supplier, so I forgot the 3. So what I can do is click on supplier, click edit, just like customers. It's the exact same concept. And I'm going to put the number 3 and I can save. And now if I do Control-Alt-V, I'm back in my list and I want to, at this point, create a bill. So that's the next thing we're going to do. So let's create a bill with supplier number 1. Supplier name is here. His address, well, we didn't complete it properly, but we would have saw his information here if we wanted it to show up. The terms, we did insert terms, so we automatically got the net 60. And just like I explained before, if we hit M, we go backwards in intervals of 1 month. We hit H, we go forward in intervals of 1 month on the date. If we hit the minus sign, we go backwards in intervals of 1 day. If we hit plus, we go forward in intervals in 1 day, but I'm going to hit T and leave it on today's date. And we have some expenses here that show up for us. Let's pretend that we have, I don't know, we purchased some office expenses. So we can put a little blurb, purchased, I don't know, highlighters, right? Whatever you want. You don't necessarily need to do this. And then the amount. So let's say $10. And then you can do save, which just saves the bill and you're on the same screen. You could do save and close, which saves the bill and then gets you out of the screen and brings you back to where you were previously. Or you could do save anew. And it's showing you the keyboard shortcut is Control-Alt-S. So I won't click it because I want to try it. Control-Alt-S. And you see, you get that little pop-up telling you bill $10 saved. And then you can do your next entry. So now I can pick my other supplier. If there's another supplier and I don't want to go back to my supplier center and I want to create one from here, I can click add new. So I could call this, I don't know, Smith Insurance. Okay. Click save. And the terms, well, if you went in your supplier center, you could have set those up. But you can just put them here. Say it's not 15. And I can start typing insurance. You know, I don't necessarily need to use that arrow. I can start typing the word and it will probably find the GL or the account if one exists. So since it does, I'll hit insurance and I'll hit my amount first, actually. And I'll do save and close. So now we're at the point where we're ready to go ahead and pay our vendors. So that's what we're going to be doing. And normally a business pays suppliers by doing a check run or a payment batch. They'll usually wait until the beginning of the week or the end of the week, and they'll pay multiple invoices at once. So that's what we're going to do. And I like doing it by heading over to expenses over here and then clicking expenses. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and click print checks, or rather pay bills. Let's go there. And we see all of the bills that we've entered. I believe I added an extra one. So we have Smith Insurance, $7.95. That's one supplier. Then we have supplier one 2 times. We had 2 bills from him, a $10 bill and a $15 bill. So let's pretend we're going to pay those 2 suppliers right now. So we want to pick the bank that we're going to pay from. So I'm going to pay this from the Scotia Bank, which right now has a balance of $85. Okay. Payment date, I'm using today's date. And this is our starting check number. So let's say my first check is check number 100. Then it'll be all sequential. QuickBooks will take into account that we've printed check number 101, 102, 103, 104. So you're telling QuickBooks what your next check number is that you're going to be inserting in your printer if you're set up or if you've purchased checks, and then we're just ticking the bills we want to pay. Now, unfortunately, I have this thing in the way. Okay, perfect. So I've ticked all of my bills. And what this tells me over here at the bottom is that, well, look, you have a balance in your account of $85. You're making a total payment of $32.95, so I'm good. I have enough cash in my bank that I won't need to be concerned about the fact that these checks might bounce. Well, they might still bounce, by the time they get the checks, my bank account might be getting closer and closer to zero. But for the time being, assuming that we've updated our books correctly, I'm good. So now I'm going to go ahead and click save and print. And I didn't do this setup before, so I'll just say that I'm finished with the setup. And now it's showing me that, okay, there was 3 items that I ticked, but there are 3 bills that relate to a total of 2 vendors. Because remember, 2 bills related to supplier number 1 and one bill was for Smith Insurance. So preview and print. Forgot the check number, so that's our first check. And this is basically what our checks are going to look like. Okay. Now, right under Smith Insurance, you would have seen his address or the business's address if I would have set it up under the vendor center. But I did not put the address, so it's not visible. But if you're printing checks, chances are you're going to want to buy window envelopes so that that section appears. And then you just hit print. And I want you to pick which printer you want to send it to. So I'm going to print on my brother printer. And that's literally all. And now you'll hear my printer going off or on in the background. And it's printing those checks. So once you finish printing them, and say I pick up my checks right now from my printer, which is printing, and I'm positive that they look good, you can just hit done. That'll bring you out of here. And I shouldn't have any open bills, you see? So now I'm back here under expenses, and where it says total, down here, I have 0. So the 10, the 795, the 15, minus the 795, and the 25. And when I go in my supplier center, I notice that there's $0. Oops. $0 open balance. Open balance is $0. Now I'm in the process of creating another bill because I want to show you something. So I'll create a $10 Smith Insurance bill, save. A common place where you're going to look at your open AP is in your aging AP report, right? So I'll go to reports. Remember at the start of the video, I had set some favorites. So I had created a favorite for accounts payable aging summary. So if I hit that, I'll see my Smith Insurance, and that will appear on the aging, as will any other bill that is open. So we're on the subject of vendors and bills and payables. If we could just talk about expenses for a second. If we go to our bank feeds, so that's under banking, and we look at all of the transactions that have been imported into QuickBooks, well, there's going to be in the spent category outflows of money. Outflows of money, meaning that they've been spent. They came out of our account. We've made some kind of payment from our bank account. So if I see an ad, that means that this monthly account fee, for instance, I didn't create any bill. There's no open AP for it. So I got to record this expense in QuickBooks. Now, if I simply add this spent dollar amount, this is what's going to happen, okay? I'm gonna show you what happens. If I go to my chart of account, because this relates to a bank account, I do Alt, Control, A. And I go in my account history of the TD Bank. You see these little arrows here that are going left and right? That means that we've set up the bank feed. So all TD Bank transactions are set up in such a way that they're coming into QuickBooks. So if I click account history, I've already added this monthly account item here. This account here, monthly account fee, I already hit add when I was in my bank feeds. And it ended up sending it to this uncategorized expense. I don't want that, okay? I want it to go to one of my GLs here. So if I have bank charges, that's where I want it to go, right? So now I can go ahead and click save. Transaction was downloaded. Are you sure you want to edit? Yes. Okay. So I've done that correctly now. Now you see it's in bank charges. This one, it went to uncategorized as well. So I want to make sure it goes in insurance. In this case, it's an expense. I'm going to click save. Okay. So now watch what happens. We go back to our banking where our feeds are coming in. Now that accounts fee item that we were looking at, it automatically, QuickBooks was very smart. It's smart enough to know that this is a bank charge because last month's bank charge, I edited it and I made it go into bank charges. So now I can just hit add. Now I'm going to go back to my chart of accounts to show you. Click account history. And we see the one, this is the one we put in previously, and this is the newer one. There's two of them. We only had one before, and that's because we transferred over the 1095 amount that was sitting in our bank feeds. So now we've entered a decent amount of transactions. So we have enough data in this QuickBooks file that we started from scratch that we can look at what some of our financial statements look like. So if I go to reports and I open up a P&L, this is just a general template of what a P&L looks like. And myself personally, I like looking at a balance sheet and a P&L side by side. So there's a way you can do that in QuickBooks. If I open up a new tab, okay, and I copy paste what I had in this tab, I am simultaneously having two tabs going on the same company file. So I click this one, P&L here, P&L there. Now, if I go back and I hit balance sheet, well, I got my balance sheet open on this tab and I got my P&L open on this tab. And I can have multiple tabs going, right? Like I can literally duplicate, duplicate, duplicate. You know, and I could be on the dashboard in this tab. But what I want to do is I want to take my balance sheet here. I want to move my P&L over here. And I want to look at them side by side. So the way you do that is it's a Windows shortcut. You do your window button and your arrow sign left to move one tab to the left, and window tab right to move your other one to the right. And you could be looking at a P&L and a balance sheet at the same time. So throughout the different steps, I've been showing you how to do things from the either customer center or vendor center. But there's a lot of things you can do, like creating an invoice or creating a bill or receiving a payment from this area right up here. So if we click the plus new sign, we get a lot of the options like we see here. So we've created an invoice. we've created a bill, we've paid bills. We can simply click these items and we'll get to a bill or an invoice or whatever else it is we want to create. Now, personally, I like using keyboard shortcuts. So instead of clicking, new customer invoice, I just do Control-Alt-I, but there's a variety of ways for us to get to wherever it is we want to get to. Now, where we want to get to is journal entry. So under other here, there's journal entry. So it's pretty straightforward. Let's pretend we're April 30th and we're doing a journal entry. This is our first journal entry, so I'll leave it as 1. And I want to make an entry for $100 of travel. Okay, so travel. Or you know what? I want to reclass one expense account to another expense account. So let's say that travel was incorrectly recorded as a meal. Okay, so I write $100. That's where it should have been in travel. That's my debit. And you can write a description, right? Which is nice. So you know why you did the journal entry. So to reclass $100 that was entered by error in meals. And then you just save and close. And that's all. Let's pretend we're now ready to do a bank reconciliation. Next item on our agenda to tackle. So let's pretend we want to reconcile the Scotia account that I see on my balance sheet. 5205. Okay. So the way we would do that is by clicking the gear button and going under reconcile. And let's pretend that our statement balance from the bank is 5205 and it's the same as our books. So we're going to go ahead and write 5205 ending balance. I'm reconciling for April the 30th. And you click start reconciling. And this shows you the payments and the deposits. So if I click all three, I'm reconciled now. So you see what happens. Notice how it says finish now, and I have a difference of 0. I take this off, the difference is 25, and now it's 0. So once we know we've properly reconciled, we get our green check mark that shows up, and we can click finish now. Reconcile, and it asks you, it has the option of, do you want to attach your statement, which is very nice if you want to do that. I'm just going to click done. Now, let's say at a later point in time, you want to look at that reconciliation that you did. What you'll do is you'll look at the left here under reports, and you'll go to the section that says for my accountant, which is here. And you'll look for the reconciliation reports. You'll click that. And it's right here. So you can view the report. You can also print it. And here's your bank reconciliation. I hope you found this video useful. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.